You ever feel sad sometimes? Yeah, me too. I think it's because I don't have enough spoons. Let's carve another one. I want to create a new cooking spoon somewhere in between of these three kind of styles. So I have a piece of wood that I am intending to use. So first thing I want to do is just kind of get a measurement here and understand what I'm working with. So now that I have kind of my reference, my boundaries, I'm just going to start sketching some bowl shapes and come up with something I like. So I'm thinking something along the lines of the left side here. So I'm gonna cut this out, fold it in half, and then trace the other side, and I'll use this as a template. So she's a little rough around the edges, but I'll clean that all up. I may still play around with the shape a little bit. I mean, just because I have a template doesn't mean I have to follow it exactly. For the handle, I'm thinking I'm gonna do similar to this. It's nice and chunky, thick, it will be durable. So let's take a look. I'm gonna have to transfer this onto this piece of wood. You see by the backside, there's a lot of not straight grain, but on this side it's a little bit better. So I'm gonna kind of work this down a little bit and just kind of understand the grain pattern a little bit better before I start transferring my design onto the spoon and taking too much wood away. Before we start hacking away with the axe, I want to give this a nice little sharpen. It's not going to be a full sharpen, it's just almost more of a honing. I have this little grinding stone. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark with permanent marker so that I can kind of track and see if I'm consistently taking off the same amount of material along the edge. So this is a carving axe. So one side you have a bevel and the other side is just straight. So I don't really need to mark the back side because it's just basically just straight, and then the bevel's on this side. So for me, I like to secure the axe in my vise, and that's just one extra variable that's taken care of, and I only need to focus on how I hold the angle of the stone. So this is a wet stone, so I got some water here, and I'm just gonna get some water on there. It will absorb a lot of water, so you just want to keep reapplying it. So you want to try and find the angle, so just kind of rock the stone until it's about flat. So taking a look, it looks like I'm getting pretty consistent with my angle in terms of taking off the permanent marker. Put this bad boy in. And I'm just going to keep going until I feel a burr where the metal kind of folds over on this side. So we have a fairly consistent burr along the back side of the edge here. What we're gonna do is take that burr down by doing the other side. So as I mentioned, the back side doesn't really have a bevel, so you can kind of just run it along the flatness of the axe. Okay, and now we have a fairly consistent burr on the side we started. So from here, I'm gonna switch over to the smoother or finer side, and then take that burr off, get another burr on the back side, take that off, and at that point, I'll probably just strop it, which I'll show you in a bit. So now we're ready to strop it and just get it razor sharp. So this is just a leather strop. It's a piece of leather that's glued to a piece of wood. That's really all it is. Then we have some compound. This just adds a little bit of grit. Just wanna get a nice coating on there. We got the face. We'll flip the axe around and do the back side. And I'll repeat this a few times, back and forth, back and forth. So a little safety alert, make sure your axe is securely fastened into the vise, especially when you're being an idiot and wearing flip-flops. So she is nice and sharp. Let's put it to the test. Let's see if you guys can see this. So yeah, see that? Get some hairs. An axe, honestly, it doesn't need to be razor sharp. Start axing some wood. So some people say it's better to cut yourself with a sharp knife or whatever than a dull one. I say to that, bullshit. I've cut myself with sharp knives and it cuts deep. I think the reason being is sometimes with dull knives or axes or whatever, you're kind of forcing things, which can, you know, lead to you cut yourself. But I would way prefer to have a slip and hit my hand or whatever with something that's dull and sharp. But I don't know, I'm no expert. But I have drawn a lot of blood. So I'm just trying to get a nice flat plane here and really get a better understanding of what the grain is doing. You can see that there is, I don't know, there's some kind of twists and, you know, the grain's not perfectly straight, which is going to be challenging, but I don't have too much wood. So preferably you get something that's just, you know, dead arrow straight, but that's not always the case. So I'll work with what I have and try and make the most of it. So yeah, a lot of wiggly grain down here, which is not amazing. I like to put in, I almost want to call these like relief cuts. So you just, you know, get some depth in there and then you come up at the top and shave it away. So yeah, we're just taking a look here. There's some separation here along the grains that we'll have to get rid of. I don't know how deep it runs. I'll keep taking off some material because I don't want to run into stupid cracks. It's so annoying when you get pretty far in the spoon and then you see a crack. So just now's the time. And honestly, if this wood is just not cutting it, you toss it. Put it in the burn pile and carry on with life. So it looks like I got rid of the crack, which is good. What I'm gonna do is determine where I want my crank, which is essentially the angle between the handle and the bowl, because that's gonna determine where I cut down and kind of angle everything down to it. Now, if your angle is steep enough, this wiggly kind of grain, we can mitigate some of the issues it can cause by creating kind of a steep slope across the grain or down the grain. In my last video, I tried explaining, you know, how to work with the grain and whatnot. I'm not going to do that again, but if you're interested, you can go check that out. So I'm going to find my center mark, roughly. And then to get my center line, I don't want to just measure grain. I want to try and follow the grain. So down here is roughly where we want to get the center line. These are just initial markings. I will need to redraw all of this because I still got a lot of material I got to take off. Okay, where'd that template at? Just gonna do a rough kind of trace just to get an idea of where my bowl's at. It gives me a general idea of what I'm working with. So if that's where the bowl is, I want the crank to be kind of right where the handle meets the spoon. So I'm gonna do a little cross cut here with my Japanese back saw, maybe about down to there. Then that will form our angle. Hopefully you get the idea. It's hard to kind of see, and then that will slope up. So after looking at this wood a little bit closer, because there's such squirrely round grain down here, I'm going to try and shift my spoon lower just to avoid. This must have been where a knot was or a branch that came out. So this is the live edge here. This is where the bark was. What causes knots is actual branches growing out. And then you have different grain patterns because the branch is round. So somewhere around here, there's probably a branch that goes into the hardwood, into the center. And that's kind of the residual that we're seeing here. So I'm going to shift. I like this length, so I'm going to shift this down. Remark the top, and then retrace my rough bowl outline, and then just cut that off. Be done with it. Get out of my face. I'm gonna axe this. So if it's bigger, that's probably better. I don't run the risk. So now my crank is going to be around here. Yeah, so the grain's much straighter down here. So that should alleviate a lot of issues curving. All right, get my cut in for the crank. This is my back saw. It's a little janky. I have another one, but I'm going to use this one until it's completely dull. But the difference is it cuts on the back stroke, where the other one I was just using, it cuts on the push stroke. So these are just really nice for fine cuts. So as I just mentioned, I kind of shifted the spoon down, but you have to be very careful, especially with old dry wood. When you're getting close to the old edge, see all these little cracks? These go into the wood. So in reality, my spoon is going to be shorter. I don't know how deep that crack goes. I probably should have did a little bit of exploratory works and kind of chopped it down before I chopped the top off. But here we are. We're going to work with it regardless. If I got to make it fucking that short, so be it. I'll make a little soup spoon instead. The thing I want to do is make some relief cuts because I'm going to start axing. All right, let's go do some axing. Okay, I'm gonna get that crank angle to where I cut my line. So my block is a little wobbly, so I'm gonna fix that before I have an accident. All right, so we're nice and stable now. Now I'm gonna take this over to the draw knife in my spoon mule in a second, just because I'm not that skilled at axing, but I contemplate this because if I don't keep practicing with the axe, I don't get better. But at the same time, you know, you make mistakes when you're practicing, which kind of sucks. Struggle's real, boys and girls. So I'm gonna split away, not carve away some of this material with the axe and my mallet. But you really want to take a look at what the grain is doing. If the grain is kind of going that way and you split, a lot of times or most times when you split, it will follow the grain. So, you know, my intention is only to take off this much material. But if the grain's going this way, it's going to split and ruin my spoon. The grain is a little wobbly, but it doesn't look like it's kind of going inward. So, cross my fingers. So it's split outward, which is good. All right. That's why the relief cut is good, because the material will just pop off. I'm gonna thin out the back of the bowl here. It's just way too thick. Because this is not going to be my final plane, I just don't want to take too much material off the back. But the more material you leave, the harder it is to work with. So doing a little bit of rounding, you know, making that just a little bit thinner, it just makes it so much easier when, you know, if it was that thick, it would have been a lot of material to cut through. I'm gonna try and axe the crank or the angle of the bowl. Might be against my better judgment, but. And that's the benefit of having a really sharp axe. You can, you know, carve away material rather than just hacking it. Old habits die hard, I guess. My last spoon I made, I ran into the exact same issue. There was a crack in the end that kind of went a lot further than I thought, and I had to lob off the handle, get away from that crack. And you can see here's another crack. So that sucks. But I honestly, I knew better. I even mentioned it before. But I'm just a silly boy, I guess. So I think I'm gonna cut away some more material, but it does look like the crack kind of goes all the way in, all the way across. So I'll have to probably end up cutting it. which is pissing me off because I really wanted this length of handle. We'll figure it out. You just work with what you got. Doesn't have to be perfect. So I lobbed off the end. The crack is dissipating, but it's getting shorter and shorter, which I'm not in love with. First, I'm going to redraw some of my lines. Again, they're just going to be rough. Then I'm going to go over to the spoon mule and get the draw knife out. So I wanted to show you how the spoon mule actually works. So here you have just some pieces of wood that are kind of held in place with this metal dowel or pin. And then as you sit down, you put your feet in there. And because this is the pivot point, it squeezes the wood in there. So it's very simple. This was not my design. It's a thing that exists. We just built it copying someone else's design, but it's pretty neat. We also made it so that it's adjustable and you can kind of take it apart and store it. So this seat kind of slides right out. These legs will pivot and fold in. Same thing with there, so it gets very, very compact. This tabletop can slide out, or you can actually adjust it with just removing a couple of dowels back and forth, depending on, you know, the distance from the seat you want the tabletop. All right, so we got my lines drawn. It's pretty close to where it's going to be. So this is tearing. I knew that it would, usually on the back of the spoon, depending on how you're cranking grain a line. Cutting this way on the back of the spoon is going to lead to tearing, but I'm just roughing it, so it's all good. This is just a little bit more convenient position for me. Now that a lot of the material has been removed and it's much more manageable, I'm gonna get this plane to a better spot. Top plane. We just want it nice and flat. So obviously this is going to take my reference marks away, but that's okay. If I lose my center line, I won't over here and then over here. It's always good practice to mark the back, because you're not going to be removing that line, so that you can redraw your center line, and then everything else you can redraw after that. So we're getting a bit of tearing. And that's because of the wobbly ass grain, which isn't, it's not going to be very fun to carve. That's where resilience comes in. You gotta fight through the pain, fight through the frustration, or just pick a good piece of it to begin with. But, oh well. Ah, shit. So I still got a lot of material here I gotta get rid of. So doing the, I don't know, I'll call these the cheeks of the spoon, is always the trickiest. You know, you could do it up here, but it's just very wobbly. But because it's not steady, my body's absorbing a lot of the impact, so it's not cut very good. So alternative to that is kind of bracing it on the corner of the block here. Let's see, that's probably a better angle for you. Not too bad. Now this side, you won't be able to see the line, and neither will I, so you just got to take it nice and slow. Ooh, that's getting real close. I got to be careful there. Whoa. So I'm bringing it in. Kind of came past my line there, which is not good, but I'll just make the neck of the handle a little thinner. So looking at my original crank cut here, there's still some material I got to remove. So I got to bring the face of, or the top of the handle here down still. Okay. So now when I go back to the draw knife, I have something to cut to. So what I like to do is I like to trim one side to the line, kind of on an angle, and then level it off and get the other side. Some separation here. Oh bueno. I don't see it on the edge, which is good. And obviously the bowl is going to be hollowed out, so we might be okay here. So something I haven't done before is Normally I would jump over to the vise, grab a thick chisel and start, getting these planes kind of aligned so they're not twisted or anything like that. But I have seen other people at this point start hollowing out the spoon, which makes a lot of sense because then you have less material around the edge to actually straighten and align with the plane of the handle. So let's hollow this out a little bit. Now, the downside to this, and actually before I start doing this, is once this is hollowed out, I'm not going to be able to draw a straight line because the ruler is going to be bending and it's just frustrating. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to redraw, and this will probably be my final lines and my final shape, and then I'll hollow it. So I'm glad I caught that before I got too carried away. All right, back to what we were doing. Let's hollow out this bowl a little bit. The lighting over is horrible. And then from here, I want to carve to my line and get the bowl shape. So I'm still keeping an eye on that little crack here. And then the crack back here, I'm also keeping an eye on. It doesn't run very deep. So I think with the taper of the handle, we should be away from that crack. Okay, so we got the bowl pretty well shaped. Now I'm gonna attempt to get the edge of the bowl nice and flat and in line with the handle. Ooh. It's not cooperating that well. Oh, fuck. So blew out a chunk. So I'm gonna bail on the carving knife and get the chisel going. I just have much more control, and as you can see, I'm getting some blowouts and stuff. So I just want to be very careful because I'm running out of material. My goal one day is to be able to, just carve an entire spoon and carve it well with just the knives, the hook knife, and axe, even without the draw knife. But it just, I'm conflicted because a part of me is saying, hey, just use the tools that get the job done and make it easier for you. But at the same time, as I was mentioning with the axe, you can't improve your skills if you're not, practicing. What you can also do, so this is dry birch. I didn't mention that this is birch. It's dry, but you can also carve green wood or fairly freshly cut wood. I have done it before. You just got to go a little bit slower and let it kind of dry it in stages. So if this was green wood, I would probably stop for the day, wrap it in a bag of plastic and let it dry out a little bit. If you cut too much with green wood and then it dries very quickly, and any kind of wave in the grain will just exacerbate, and you'll have curved spoons. I think this was actually from green wood. If you can see that the handle has a nice little woo to it. So I didn't really let it dry slowly enough. Also, there's a giant knot here that didn't help things, but it's actually quite nice to work in green wood. The wood's a lot softer. It's just a different way of doing things depending on what kind of wood you have, what kind of stock you're using. And just pay attention to the grain and how things are cutting. Because if a tear gets away from you, it can run really deep and just ruin your piece. Because the back of this bowl has so much material, it just takes a while to carve off. So I'm gonna attempt to use the axe. Just nice and slow. I think that's as far as I want to go with that. It's just a little off balance. The handle's just a little too thick there. So I'm gonna play around, get the radius going on this handle and just kind of feel it out, and yeah, just getting the handle and maybe work on the back of the bowl and stuff, and then at some point I'll get hollowing out the bowl a little bit more. All right, so getting better eyes on this stupid little crack here. I think it's gonna be a problem. Let's keep carving down and see where we're sitting. All right, I think I chased the crack away. So just reshaping the end here now. All right, just got some reference marks on the edge, and then when I start tapering it, I'm just gonna go to those lines, and you know, just makes it a little bit easier. All right, we're at the point where had I chosen a different piece of wood with a better grain, this would be a lot easier than I think it's going to be. So let's do a little test cut, see how the knife glides through. So I feel a little chatter, I feel a little tearing. It's not too bad. All right, that side, not too bad. So it's tearing back here. So essentially from this point over to here, I need to carve that way. I can't stress enough how important good lighting is. And I do not have good lighting down here. Right now it's kind of in behind my head, which isn't awesome. But you want kind of indirect lighting, but also lighting that can give you shadows. You want to be able to see your cut marks. So I think I still see a little remnant of that crab, but shh, no one needs to know. You'll barely notice it. So I'm holding the spoon up against my like sternum or my chest, carving just to get a good base. It does hurt after a while, so you can really grab anything, but this is just the bottom of a leather slipper on a necklace, and there you go. Now the pressure's kind of distributed a little bit better. If I were to take off my shirt, there'd probably be a big red spot right there, which I'm not gonna do because this is a PG channel. The grain, surprisingly, is working with me very well, so I'm quite happy about that. It was just on this backside, and then over here, the grain got a little wonky. So I think for now, I'm gonna leave the handle, and I'm gonna start working on the bowl, getting that kind of shape down, get all the extra material off there. And I still have a bit of a cut where my crank cut was. So I'm gonna have to bring the handle down a little bit and then the bowl to meet it, and then kind of blend it in. You don't want a sharp angle. Oh, I mean, you could do a sharp angle. I don't want a sharp angle. I'm ready to start getting that bowl hollowed out, and I want to set up a kind of consistent border for cooking spoons, especially ones you intend to use. It's nice to have a beefier border. It's just will hold up a little bit longer, whatnot. So this is just a rough line for now. I do think I'm going to widen this. Also, at this point, I want to start thinking about how I want to start doing my transitions. So that includes how the radius of the handle kind of tapers into the edge of the bowl. So there's different options. This one is kind of a little bit more seamless. This one, which I think I want to try and do something similar. It goes flat, like a very obvious flat, and then slowly into the rounded handle. So I like the lines on this. It's a little bold. And obviously we need the bottom of the bowl here. Something like that. So we'll try and do this with the camera, but it's always a little sketchy. I really like carving spoons because it's very peaceful. You know, my mind kind of just relaxes. But you do have to pay attention to what you're doing. I always find that this top right corner is the hardest to do. It's hard to get an angle. Little progress update. So it's close. It's getting very close. Just finishing off a few things. Gotta get this taper a little bit better. The bowl is almost there. I gotta just work on the border just a little bit more. We'll see where it goes. It's been a couple days since I've touched my spoon, and I've come back just to find that we've developed a bit of a bow. If you can see that, kind of the grains have a bow to them, which it was not like that 2 days ago, which is very odd because this material I was using is bone dry. But I guess, you know, there's just tension built up in wood. And then when you take other wood away, that tension's released. And yeah, that's the result, which is just very weird. But what I'm gonna do, or what I have been doing, is I'm shaving off the right side here, just so we can kind of match it. It's hard to see, but there's a curve. So it almost kind of indents there. So I've been removing some material down here and kind of curving it, which it's actually not a bad detail. It's not gonna be perfect, it's not gonna be perfectly symmetrical, but I'm just kind of doing a little bit just to kind of match, just so it doesn't look so oblong and weird. Obviously, because I'm taking off material here, I'm gonna have to reshape and get the contours back in there. But it's all part of the process, just something interesting I thought I'd share. One of the harder spots I find to carve is where kind of two angles meet. I mentioned previously that I don't really want any sharp edges. I want to kind of round it off. And that's because it just makes it a little bit easier. So when you're carving down one angle, you'll often be left with a bit of a lip here. And then you have to come back and then carve that side, and a lot of times you'll have a lip on the other side. So this is where you want to get the tip of your knife super sharp, and then just use the very tip and just take off ever so lightly, and kind of just carve, kind of angle and swoop the edge up. Just keep working it. You might have to go back and forth. Eventually you should be able to get rid of that roughness and that edge of the wood. And if that fails, you know, just grab a little bit of sandpaper and get it in there. No one has to know. So all my carving is done. I got everything where I want it to be. My transitions are done. So now it's time to finish. So rather than grabbing a fine piece of sandpaper, I want to burnish this spoon. If you sand it, you'll take off all the carve marks or facets, which I want to keep. I like that look. So you grab this is just like a river rock. There's actual tools out there, but you just rub down the entire spoon. You take off any sharp edges around the bowl. And yeah, this will keep a lot of the carve marks, but it'll knock off any high spots and whatnot. But if you do this to the entire spoon, you'll get a nice, beautiful, glossy sheen. So I'm gonna do this for the entire spoon, and then it's time to put some oil on here. So we got all the burnishing done. It's nice and smooth, nice and shiny. So now we're gonna apply our finish. This is a mixture of beeswax and mineral oil. And you just want to get a nice liberal coating along the entire spoon. And then what I like to do once it's all rubbed in is I'll pop it in the microwave for like 15 seconds. You want to keep an eye on it because it will burn if you run it too long. But this just kind of heats up the wood, and I find it sucks in the finish a little bit deeper into the wood pores. I might do that a couple times, and then I'll reapply another layer. And you can do that, a few times. That's it, my friends. Here is our finished product. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's inspired you to go out there, get your hands dirty, maybe even a little bloody. All the best, and take care.